In today's show, we're talking position battles. Who earns the fifth and final starter spot for the Blazers? Who fills out the back half of the rotation? Who might sneak in and get some playing time we don't see coming? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond, and you are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen every single day. In today's show, we are getting into the nitty-gritty of position battles. Who's going to start? Who fills out the back half of the rotation, and who can maybe sneak in and earn some playing time later in the year if they're not there at the beginning. Portland's roster's set. They got 15 players. They have one two-way spot to fill out, and potentially they'll do that here. You assume they'll invite some youngsters to training camp, and they'll sign the best tall player with less than 4 years of NBA experience to that second two-way spot, and that's how they'll do it. They need front court depth. That's how it works. But they got 15 NBA contracts on there. They got a bunch of young dudes in the back half of the roster, so it's not like they need other youth. But it's the group is set. They can add more players up to 20 heading into training camp, but they haven't done so already, and it's probably a safe bet that this is the group that they have. So what I want to explore today is kind of what are the position battles that when training camp does open up here in September, later, as we head into summer into fall, who is actually battling for playing time, or what positions are really up for grabs? There are four starters that are basically cemented. Damian Lillard is going to start at point guard. Anthony Simons is going to start at shooting guard. Jeremy Grant's going to start at power forward, and Jusuf Nurkic is going to start at center. That's one spot up for grabs. I know that there are fans debating the sort of merits of starting Anthony Simons. The team isn't. That's not something they're debating. That is a fit question for another day. Here, let's just talk about what's actually going to happen. So, assuming that knowledge, what we're really talking about is who starts at small forward. And I think this is the most intriguing position battle. Competition is a better word. It's not battle. Too many war metaphors in the sports world. It's a competition to see who gets that three spots. I think this is the most intriguing one. We'll talk about some others later in the show. But let's start here with this one, again, with the knowledge that four starting spots are set. I think if I was pressed today to guess who starts at small forward on opening night, I would guess Nassir Little. And the case for Nassir Little is pretty simple. He's the right size. The Blazers need length on the wings. It's one of the things they're lacking a little bit, and if you assume that Damian and Ant are going to play a bunch together, which I think they will, even if you really reduce their minutes playing together, you're still talking, if you are super hyper-aggressive with limiting their minutes together, it's still 12 minutes a night. And that's fine. I think they can get there, but it's 12 minutes a night to begin and then end the game. Even that seems weird. I don't think they'll be that aggressive with it, but sure. Let's assume that they do that. Even if you do that, you got to start the game with a small forward, and you got to start the game with a bigger forward in my mind, or it makes more sense to start the game with a bigger forward, just because you have two guards there, two smaller guards there, and it helps if you have some bigger, longer wing options, and Nassir Little is that. Nas is probably a better one-on-one defender than he is help defender at this point, but he has some skills as a shot blocker that could that if he gets a little bit better defensive awareness, he could become a better rim protector. Or a better rim protector is not even the right word. Help side defender than he is right now. I think he's better at one-on-one defense than the team concept. But the better at one-on-one defense is valuable. Blazers need team defenders. Nas is 6'5", 6'6" with length. 6'5" with length. He's strong. He's totally a comfortable three, and I think he's even an undersized four because of his particularly his offensive rebounding. I think he can play that a little bit more on that in a moment. But he's, to me, the ideal choice at three, and not because he's better than the other options, but because he's the right size, and some of the other options maybe fit better with that second unit. So If I had to guess today, I'm recording this on the evening of July 28th, or the afternoon of July 28th, depending on where you are in the world. My time, the evening of July 28th. I think Nas is your pick, or my pick to start at small forward, but he's by no means a lock to be that guy by any means, because the Blazers have other options, including Josh Hart, who I think is pretty obviously the Blazers' fifth best player. But best is, it's relative, and fit and your teammates, your coworkers and this stuff matters. It matters. So while Josh Hart, I think, has a compelling case to be start at 3, it leaves the Blazers a little bit small on the wing. It leaves them playing an undersized, I don't know if Ant's an undersized 2, but he's not super strong. Like, he's not like a big physical 2. But he might be tall enough. He might be the same size as like most shooting guards, and a little small at the 3. And adding 2 smaller wings next to Dame, we've kind of seen this experiment before. Norman Powell's probably a better offensive player than Josh Hart's, a little better scorer than Josh Hart, but Josh Hart's probably, for my money, a little better overall player because of the defense and the passing. But we kind of seen let's consider them like the Norm and Josh thing like pretty equal. 3-guard lineup can only go so far. There just are real limitations. Like, I think even Hart as a defensive upgrade, there are real limitations to what he can play. Can Hart close the game at 3? Yeah, I think that's in certain situations, yes, depending on the matchup, right? And depending on who Jeremy Grant is comfortable guarding in that matchup, right? Like, I think you might be able to get away with it depending on who the opponent is. But Hart to me doesn't seem like an ideal 3, but he's totally capable of it. He's something like, he played 13 games in Portland where he was just absolutely lights out as a shooter. Nuts. Like his 13 game sample size with the Blazers is like borderline all-star stuff. He was so good. If you think he's going to be a little bit less than that because, his teammates are going to be different and he's just not going to be on an absolute heater like he was for a month or whatever in Portland, he's probably more like a league average shooter or slightly below average is probably what he's grades out as for his career. So, you can hide him on the court with that group is what I'm trying to say, even as a below average shooter, and it's okay, but he's not like an ideal spacer, and his skills are probably better used because he's better with the ball in his hands, so getting him on the court when it's not Dame and Ant, but one of those 2 guards, you maximize what he does well. He can pass. He can dribble a little bit. He's probably a better complement to either of the 2 starting guards than as the 3rd guy with those starting guards. You just take away some of what Josh Hart is good at, and the whole point of putting guys on the floor at the right time is maximizing what they can do. I think Josh Hart is their 5th best player. I think Josh Hart is, I like straight up am a fan of his game, like a big fan of his game. I really have enjoyed watching him, prior to the Blazers and certainly in his 13-game heater with the Blazers, a ton of fun. I think you get the most out of Josh Hart off the bench. But he is certainly, in theory, in competition with Nassir Little. And I think the last reasonable choice, I think there's 2, and I'll say the one that isn't reasonable first. I think there's an outside chance Justise Winslow starts there. Really outside, though. So I think really who you're talking for the 3rd person to potentially start at small forward, and I don't think it's particularly likely, is Gary Payton. Gary Payton II is an elite point of attack defender. He can play bigger than he is. And that's good because he's 6'2". But or maybe 6'3", depending on what he's listed at in the media guide, but 6'2"-ish. He plays bigger than that. He certainly does, and I think he can guard 2s and 3s and 4s, and he's kind of like a screen roller on offense. His offensive role is something more akin to like center or power forward or center, but defensively he's like a point of attack guy. You want him on guards. That's where he's like great. He can guard up and guard bigger and guard larger wings and be good at it, but great, like where you maximize his skills is him guarding 1s and 2s and locking up lead ball handlers. That's where he's best. It took him a while to kind of find his spot in the league, and then he really found it last year. So there's reason to believe that like now that people and the league appreciates what GP can do, that there's like more to his game and he can continue to expand it. He's one of the best defensive guards in the league, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. If he gets a big minute role, I don't think he's going to make an all defensive team just because of like the minutes type of distribution that he's going to end up with, but he's good enough to be in consideration for an all defense type team if he's healthy and plays all year long. He's that good on defense. That doesn't mean that he's a good starting small forward for this particular team. It just means that's the case for him. Elite point of attack defender, really good cutter, not much of a floor spacer, but is an okay, stand him in the corners type of stuff. Shooting is not why GP's on the court. Offense is not why he's on the court. Great offensive rebounder, really good cutter, elite defender. That's the case to be made, but I think based on size and skill set, Nas is who I would assume starts at small forward. But there's a case to be made for Josh Hart, and there's a case to be made for Gary Payton. I think that's a real competition. I think there's a slim chance that Justise Winslow enters into that conversation, although I think it's pretty darn unlikely. That's the biggest competition as the Blazers head through summer into training camp. We're a little ways away from training camp, to be clear. This is the end of July, not the beginning of September, but this will be when things start up back in September. And as we head through August, kind of the quiet season in the NBA, this is something to consider. What the Blazers really have sort of on their palette is a competition for one starting spot. And then it's a competition for who plays and how they play behind them. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about who's playing those backup forward minutes, backup big man minutes to end the show. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar that I have ever tried. I've been eating Built Bars for a long time, closing in on 3 years. I really like peanut butter brownie. I really like cookies and cream. I like the double chocolate. I like the salted caramel. But they have been innovating. Built Bar does not rest. They make new products all the time, including their run of Puff Bars, which are chocolate-covered marshmallow consistency protein bars, including a new one that I was lucky enough to get to try, the cookie dough Puff Bar. Real pieces of cookie dough on top of this marshmallowy gooiness, all covered in chocolate. 15 grams of protein, just 130 calories. Still packing a punch, still tasting great, and just the sweetness pick-me-up you need without being crazy sugar heavy, and still providing you with protein that you can really use. So whether you want some of the other flavors or whether you're really interested in that cookie dough puff, go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, let's talk more position battles here in the second segment. There's a competition. I try not to use battles, and here I am again. There's a legit competition for small forward, but even if that's decided because Nas seems like the best fit there, he might not be the biggest minute getter at that spot, which means that you're going to move guys in. Maybe Josh Hart ends up playing more minutes at small forward than Nas. I think that's pretty reasonable. Maybe GP ends up playing more minutes or about the same number of minutes as that 3 spot. But I think those guys fit better on the second unit. I think they fit better on the second unit for what I mentioned before, was that you maximize Josh Hart by getting him on the court when he's the second ball handler, not the third, because his skills are better as a driver and a playmaker than they are as just a spacing shooter. He's more of a secondary playmaker than he is a spacer. Although, again, he shot it so darn well in a Blazers jersey last year. I think GP is better when you get him on the court and let him guard 1s and 2s. So not having him on the court with Damian Ant, where it's harder to hide those guys on forwards, and you can just put GP on a really good secondary ball handler, or depending on how other teams run their substitutions, get him in there when he's more of a guard type. Or at least the other teams go small, which is more typical in second units where teams go smaller, so you have better ways to hide your smaller guards. I think that maximizes their skills. But there's a position on that second unit that I think is still up for grabs. And I want to say this caveat before we sort of get too deep into it. I don't think the position designations matter a lot. But we're not all the way there in positionless basketball. We're all the way there in discussing positionless basketball and thinking about basketball less in terms of positions, but who you're able to guard, and you can think about it like this: who guards big forwards? That's kind of who plays power forward on the second unit, right? Who guards big forwards? Who guards fast guards? That's maybe a better way to think about positions. Is who can you guard and who guards you is a better sense of it. We probably don't need to define point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward. We could probably say primary ball handlers, wings, bigger wings. That's probably the easiest way to do it. The Blazers are a little light on bigger wings. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to need that position. Particularly, you assume Jeremy Grant plays a whole bunch of minutes at power forward. When he comes off the court, who steps in for him? I think that's one of the really interesting sort of spots, backup backup 4 competitions. This is an interesting competition as you head into camp, who might get it. I assume that it is a competition between Justise Winslow and a little bit of Trendon Watford, and also Nassir Little will see some time there, particularly if he doesn't end up starting. That's Nassir Little's spot. But if he does, you could say that Winslow and Nas are pretty much interchangeable if they're on the court. This is why positions matter less. But sure, Winslow and Watford in my mind are competing for that spot. I think Jabari Walker is on the outside, although he has the skill set to be in the consideration. But if you listen to the podcast, I'm never going to guess that a rookie could jump up into that spot. Like, rookies tend to struggle. They earn minutes when there's opportunity. If Walker wins it in camp, I will be waving the flag because he's a guy who's easy to root for. But if I'm just sort of using my logical brain, which is what I try to do on the show, I think he's on the outside, so I think you're really talking about Justise Winslow and Trendon Watford at those backup spots. The case for Winslow is that the Blazers seem to be invested in him as a defender. When they were good for that brief period, for that 1 week when they won 4 games against Giannis-less Milwaukee and Rustless the Lakers, and then the straight up full Memphis Grizzlies in Memphis. What a win! What a win! Justise was key to that run, and he was key to that run because he could guard big wings. He could guard. Oh, it wasn't Giannis, it was Middleton-less Bucks. I apologize, but he could guard LeBron James. Like, they put him on LeBron James. They could put him on big wings and not be worried about it. He also not very big, but he's really strong, has got long arms. He played center in Miami at a brief period of his career, basically played point guard and center, kind of a point center, truly hybrid player, truly positionless player. But he can guard bigger wings, and the Blazers will ask him to do that a lot, which is why I think that backup 4 slot is his. It's why I think Trendon Watford is on the outside of the rotation, or your backup 5. Watford has good defensive sense, like he knows where to be, but he doesn't protect the rim at all. He's not much of a shot blocker in that spot, and he's not near the physical defender that Winslow is. They're both intriguing passers, but for my money, Winslow's a better passer. It's just neither of them are shooters, and I think Winslow gives you more on defense and more as a ball handler, so I'll give him the nod. Watford is bigger, physically taller and a little bit larger. He's probably not stronger yet, but he can get there. He's close. And Watford probably has a little more offensive, one-on-one offensive skills. So if you end up needing that, that's why you turn there. If you don't end up needing offense because you have Josh Hart and you have Ant playing on that second unit, if the second unit is something like Anthony Simons, Gary Payton, Josh Hart, backup center, which we'll talk about in a second, the 4 spot is probably makes more sense as Winslow because you don't need individual offense, you do need defense, you do need rebounding on that group. He's a better rebounder and a better defender than Trendon Watford right now, and I think that decision is easy. Trendon Watford, this is why it's a competition. He's a young player that is continuing to grow. His task is to make it really difficult for Chauncey Billups to not get him on the floor. And really difficult to not get him on the floor means he's part of the calculation for the last position battle that I think the Blazers have, which is who plays backup center. They've kind of hinted at it this summer, but I think there's a variety of options. Let's talk about that to close the show. Still a pass versus point guard, still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk about the big man rotation, the backup big man rotation. Jusuf Nurkic is going to play 28 to 30 minutes at center. Nurk cannot be a 35-minute-a-night center. You do not get the best out of Jusuf Nurkic when he's tired. When he's tired, he makes bad decisions with the ball. He fouls too much on defense. You don't get the most out of him. And there's just a reality that I think the best you can get out of Nurk, even when he's been at his peak, is something like 29 minutes, just shy of 30 minutes. That's fine. That's fine. If you get 30 good minutes out of Nurk, 29 good minutes out of Nurk, even 28 good minutes out of Nurk, you'll be in good shape. He's good. 4 7-minute shifts. You'll be all right. You'll be a good basketball team with 4 positive 7-minute shifts from Nurk. It's okay. First 7 minutes, last 7 minutes, and some middle 14-minute stretch in there. You can do the math. Pretty easy. But 28 minutes of Nurk means you have 20 minutes of question mark at center. And I think the other, like the starting small forward spot's more intriguing, right? It's more intriguing. Who plays backup 4 is pretty intriguing because it's like the space for Trendon Watford, who was a breakout player last year, earned a contract, was really good in summer league. It's a place for him to play. And part of, who plays at 3 plays into who plays at backup 4, right? But backup center is a bigger question mark, and twice this year, both Chauncey Billups or not twice, once Chauncey Billups, once Joe Cronin, in separate interviews, alluded to the idea that Jeremy Grant and Justise Winslow could play some minutes at center. That's real. That's real. They're going to play that small. You do not give all that money. I mean, it's not all that money, but you don't give that money to Gary Payton. You don't give him 3 for 28 or whatever it was, 3 for 29, to not play him. You're going to get him on the court. If you're going to get him on the court and you're still going to have Ant and you're still going to have Dame, you're going to play minutes when you're small. If you have Jeremy Grant traded for him and all this big minute role, you're going to play him 35 minutes a night. The place to play Grant and potentially the place to play Winslow, who has played center in the past, is probably at least a little bit of backup center. That adds some complication because when I was kind of penciling this out in my mind, I thought that was Trendon Watford's minutes to play there because I thought just based on the way the team treated him, that was where he was going to be. But again, he's not a rim protector. He was a pretty bad defender. I like watching him with my eyeballs. I'm like, yeah, he knows how to play defense. The numbers for Watford suggest he was pretty bad on defense all year. Some of it was just who he played with, but you got to use both your eyes and your numbers to kind of get the full picture. That's no one using one or the other is doing it correct. You need both to get the full picture. So I would concede that my eyes deceive me a little bit on my appreciation of Trendon Watford as a defender because, I knew he wasn't a shot blocker, but the other stuff suggested he just struggled a little bit on that end, struggled a little bit on defense. Struggle a little bit on defense is not the ideal backup center. Jeremy Grant is a pretty good help side defender. I don't think he's this elite clean it up help side defender, but he can protect the rim a little bit. I think Justise Winslow can do that a little bit. I think Nassir Little has the physical tools to be pretty good at guarding the rim. He's good at guarding his own man around the rim. He's good at bothering shots around the rim. It's just, can he be a help side defender? The Blazers are betting on it. So I think really when you're talking about backup center, you're talking about Grant, you're talking about Winslow, you're talking about Watford, and then you're talking about the odd man out. And this is, I think, who people, not that they don't talk about, I don't want to say everyone forgets about Drew Eubanks, because they don't. They just are being realistic. He is more emergency center than he is backup center, but there are nights when Drew Eubanks has to be the backup center. Absolutely has to be the backup center, and I think that's real. I think the Blazers want to go small, and they want to play super fast with the second unit. If you have a Damian Lillard team, and you have a Yusuf Nurkic team, that team's never going to run, fly. Nurk, he's just not up and down guy. It's not a skill set. And Dame has pretty much never been on high-paced teams. Dame is a killer in the half-court, one of the best half-court offensive players in the league. One of the best half-court scorers in the history of the NBA. He's an elite offensive player, and he wants to play in his half-court pace. I don't think you need to speed Dame up to get the most out of him or the most out of your offense. But it's pretty clear that the second unit wants to play small and play faster and fly with Josh Hart, who wants to grab and go, and Trendon Watford, who wants to grab and go, and Gary Payton, who's a really good cutter, and I think you can get more out of Ant if you play faster. They want to play fast and they want to play small with that second unit, and I think that's maybe a tactical advantage that they can have. But there are going to be nights when they need Drew Eubanks, and Drew Eubanks is a pretty good rebounder. He's a great hook shotter. He can score with hooks with both hands over both shoulders. He's got good touch around the rim. I wouldn't want to play Drew Eubanks 25 minutes a night as a backup center. I don't think you're going to be a really good team with that, but I think it's okay if he's a small, 16, 17 minutes when you need him type of guy. Ideally one shift, 9 minutes, and then you go the other way. You play mostly small and bring Nurk back. But I don't think Drew Eubanks is like so outclassed that if you do have to play him, 12 minutes or whatever it is, 11, 12 minutes, two short shifts in each half, 2 5-minute shifts each half, then that you're in trouble. I think he's capable of that. And I think there are going to be nights when having another center is just absolutely necessary. Obviously, with injuries and all of these things, like this is going to all change. I'm assuming in all of this math, all of this sort of this thought experiment stuff I'm doing considers everybody's healthy and fully ready to go. Whoever gets, someone's going to miss some time somewhere in there. It's going to shake things up, and then the whole rotation will change. But for now, I think these are the spots that are sort of intriguing and sort of how they handle it. Does Jabari Walker put himself in the position to play backup 4? Does the team need Drew Eubanks? Their desire to play small and fast doesn't work out, but they need Drew Eubanks in that second unit. And if they do have Drew Eubanks, how fast can they play? And if you have Eubanks in there who's not much of a shooter, can you play GP and Justise Winslow and get away with still be a potent second unit? Like, do you have enough shooting if you do that? It all plays into each other. Like, all of these things are related. It's not, everyone doesn't exist, to use a phrase from a former executive, in a vacuum. It all exists together. I love lineup stuff. I'm fascinated by how the parts fit. The part of basketball I like is basketball, which makes this offseason stuff a little bit challenging for me as someone who I'm into the hoops part of hoops. That's the thing I like, is the ball bouncing and who plays with who and all of those things and how it all fits together. I don't think that these are like crazy competitions. I think that they are intriguing choices that Chauncey Billups has to make. I don't mean to paint this like there is a competition for small forward. That's me doing an impression of myself for those scoring at home. But it is some intriguing decisions, because the decision you make to start Nas triggers who comes in on that second unit as the 2 and the 3, and who comes in the second unit as the 2 and the 3 means who needs to play 4 and 5 because of the fit, and the size of the other team will dictate how much you can get away with, or if you want to be the team that tries to dictate it. Can the Blazers play so small and so fast that teams can't afford to go big in the second unit, right? Like, that's the gamble, or the bet rather, is that we're going to be the ones that set the style, and then you play to our style. If the Blazers are capable of doing that, if they're the one dictating the terms, they're in really good shape. You don't get to dictate the terms every night. The NBA is too darn long. That's why you need depth and you need options, and I think this illustrates the way the Blazers have options. One name I didn't mention before we get out of here is Shaedon Sharpe. The Blazers, if they want to play Shaedon Sharpe, are going to just have to play him at some minutes on the wing. Some minutes as a small forward type player. And they're going to just have to do it. He doesn't have a natural spot. If you want to play Josh Hart and you want to play Gary Payton and you're going to play Damian and you're going to play Ant, and all of those dudes play a bunch, that's a lot of minutes at the guard spots that are taken. The room for Shaedon Sharpe to play is at the 3, so that's over Nas or over Hart and GP, who are going to also play minutes at the 3. And it means that Nas moves up to the 4, which means that the competition for Winslow is Nas as your backup power forward. Like, just doing this sort of experiment in my head, it's hard to figure out where Shaedon Sharpe plays unless the Blazers say, Shaedon's going to play, we'll figure out the rest, and the people who get squeezed are, Nassir Little second shift or Justise Winslow's minutes altogether. Those are the competitions. Those are the Blazer spots that I think are up for grabs. The starting spots are mostly taken care of, and how the second unit fits will be something fascinating that I follow all year long. Some programming notes. In August, this show, which is typically 5 days a week, and I've rarely missed them, but I did miss one this week, and I apologize for it, is going to go to 3 days a week. I'm going to be out of town for a big chunk of August, so I'm going to pre-record some stuff, some long interviews with some fun people. That'll begin next week. You will not want to miss it. Some fun Blazers folks are going to be on the show. Make sure you come back for that one. But starting in August, 3 days a week, I believe how it's going to work is I'm going to have shows on Monday, on Wednesday, and on Friday mornings. They might change up a little bit, but the pre-recorded stuff over the first couple weeks of August will be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This is a daily podcast. I've committed a lot of time and energy to making a daily podcast, and I take a great deal of pride of having something in your feeds or on your YouTube channel every day of the week. But August is going to be a little bit different. We'll come back strong in September, heading into training camp with our countdown to training camp and all of those things. But if you'll join me, please do. Make me your first listen. Make this your first listen. Make Locked On Blazers your first listen. 3 days a week, all month long in August. Enjoy yourselves during the quiet months of this Blazers season. If news does break, if there's some like big news stuff, hopefully it doesn't happen those first 2 weeks of August where I'm going to be out of town for a little bit, but I'll be back. Like I'm not going to be totally MIA. So join me 3 days a week, all August long, and then we'll come back to 5 days a week once we hit September. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.